It's really sunshiny out there, but luminous is what I was really striving for, and my brain just didn't get there. Very luminous morning. And I really am filled with gratitude this morning. And first of all, just seeing all of you here really fills me with gratitude, and knowing that there are all of these people that regularly join us on Zoom fills me with gratitude. And we have a practice period going on right now, and it's in our second week. And Matt Streit gave a lovely talk this morning, and just the commitment to practice that I saw, and the support for one another, just in our being there, and then the questions and comments that came up, it really truly filled me with gratitude. So I'm really appreciative of that. And I also had the opportunity yesterday. We have a group of teams that are working, basically planting seeds for the future of Dharma Field. And yesterday, one of these teams met as the strategic planning team. And again, the care toward this organization that I saw, and toward Buddhist practice, and toward carrying this practice forward, was really, really heartwarming. And so I can't say enough. And we have another team meeting today, the Social Warmth team. And thank you all who are part of that team as well. And then we also have organizational fine tuning, which hasn't had an opportunity to meet yet. So if you haven't had a chance to be on one of these teams, I can guarantee you there will be projects coming out of them that you'll be able to participate in if you're interested. So anyhow, I'm just filled with gratitude. Thank you all for being here and being part of this Sangha. So this morning, I'm going to give a talk that I've titled Presencing. Presencing. And I'm going to talk about theater for a while, if you don't mind. And if you do mind, we're in trouble, because that's what my talk is about. So, but I will bring it back to Zen practice and to life too by the end of the talk. At least that's my intention. So first, I want to start with that word presencing. You know, it's a word that I know is out there. And I had to look it up to see what it means. The reason I had to do that is I'm going to use the word in a way that I was using it about 20 years ago when I was working on my dissertation. It's hard for me to imagine. It was 20 years ago I was working on that, but that's when it was. But it is a word. It's not a word you're going to find in Merriam-Webster's dictionary. I know, because I tried looking it up in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, and it's not that kind of word. It's a different kind of word. And so when I looked it up on Google, I got the AI overview, which I'm still at the point where I look at that and I go, now I got to see if that's right. So I still go past that. But this time I was like, good enough. This is the definition that seems to be floating around on the internet, and that there's actually an institute, a presencing institute, that I think this definition comes from. And it is being anchored in the present while being ready to respond to future developments. So that seems to be sort of a prominent way it's being used right now, but I'm going to use it in a more idiosyncratic way. As I said, I came to my usage when I was working on my dissertation over 20 years ago. And what I was doing is I was trying to describe something that happens in the theater that is essential to theater. And what it is, it's that moment when audience and performer come alive together as a single entity. They just come alive together. You know those moments in the theater. It's those moments when this just trembles with life. It trembles with life. And you could hear a pin drop. So I don't know if many of you go to the theater, but if you know those moments, the whole thing's just alive right there. And we're all coming together, I realized, as I was working on my dissertation, right here at this moment of performance. It's all right here, coming together, just what's happening right now. And there's this energy that shows up. So that's the moment that I was talking about, and that I was trying to figure out, that I was calling presencing. And it has a little bit more to it. And it has to do with that energy, because it seems like there's energy coming from the actor. And we have talked, you've probably used that word, somebody having presence or an actor having presence. I never had the fortune of seeing Gene Hackman live in theater, but I can tell you right now, when I would watch him in movies, that was it. I was coming through the celluloid. I don't know how he did it. He was usually better than any movie he was in, but he was pretty amazing. But we can sense that presence in an actor. So there's this energy that comes from the actor, but the actor is actually getting energy from the audience. So the actor is actually feeding off the audience and then giving back to the audience. And the audience is getting from the actor, and they're giving back to the actor. So actors giving to the audience is giving to the actor, and it's what the celebrated American director Anne Bogart called in a keynote speech that I'd seen her give at a drama conference. It's what she called the feedback loop. I don't know if she's ever written about it. She just mentioned it in this talk. And it's where you can't figure out where the energy's coming from. Is it coming from the actor? Is it coming from the audience? You can't pin it down. And it doesn't matter, because it's really just right here, right now, that matters. Or what I was calling at the time, the present. And I'm going to come back to that word later in my talk. And that present that I was referring to in my dissertation, that's what's being experienced right now, right here, right now, as presence. That's what it's coming across as, presence, which is the condition of being present, but it's also a more obscure definition that would be in Merriam-Webster dictionary, definition 5B of presence, which is a noteworthy quality of poise and effectiveness. And then they give an example, the actor's commanding presence. So think about that, the noteworthy quality of poise. And poise is that ability to be right here. You're not thrown off balance. You have poise. And actors have to have poise. Let me tell you, I was an assistant stage manager for a theater company for a little while. I was the dramaturg, but I was new to this theater company, and the assistant stage director who has to do a lot of the grunt work and to make theater magic happen. And she basically ran the show, and she was on vacation. And I said, well, I'll do it for you. That was a bad idea. And I still remember there was a set. It was this very fancy set, and it had like a scroll that would come down. Well, the scroll fell off. It just fell off the set. And I saw it fall off, and I had no idea what to do about it. And this actor came backstage, like after the scene had ended, he goes, what the hell are you doing? Part of the set just fell down. You got to go out there. And I just went, oh my goodness. So no poise coming from me at that moment. But actors, to really be present, they have to deal with all kinds of stuff. A friend of mine in high school, well, I was in high school. She was a teacher of mine, actually, but somebody I was friends with as well. She was singing in a production of the Pirates of Penzance, Gilbert and Sullivan, and she forgot her lyrics. So she walked up to the edge of the stage and, singing in melody, told the conductor she'd forgotten what her words were, and could he please sing them to her, which is perfectly, if you know Gilbert and Sullivan, is perfectly in character for something like that to happen. And then she got her words, and then she remembered what they were, and then she continued singing, right? So that poise and effectiveness. So one isn't thrown, pitched about, and then unable to do what needs to be done. That presencing, or that presence. And so when I use the word presencing, I was thinking, well, presencing then is the act of evoking presence. But I want to make sure we see that it's clear that we don't know just what is evoking that presence, right? What is evoking that presence is unclear. And that, I think, gets us some unclarity in my own thinking at the time. And that word presencing and that idea that I came with has never really left my mind. When I go to the theater, I still want it to happen. It doesn't always happen. You get in the theater and it doesn't, that aliveness is not always there. But I think about it, and I think about how it seems to be working, and even kind of the mystery of it. And as I was taking up Zen practice, it seemed to me that it was a word that, I don't know, it could be helpful in helping us to see Zen practice with some fine tuning. So that's what I'm going to eventually talk about. Before I do, though, I need to elaborate a little bit more on the theatrical presencing. All right, the first thing to understand about theater is it's predicated on separation between life and theater, between life and theater. And we probably don't think too much about it. There's whole apparatus that lets you know when you go into a theater, there are seats, there's a stage, there's lighting equipment and all this stuff that would indicate it. But you don't need any of that for there to be theater. You just need that separation between life as it is and theater as if it were. That's it. That's all you need. So theater could break out right now. Probably has been happening. Trembling in and out of my talk. That's it. So, but separate, it needs to be separate from life, or it's not theater, it's just life, correct? So it's predicated on that separation, and the other separation that you probably heard that was implied in there between performer and audience. You need a performer and you need somebody who's witnessing that, though that could actually happen even within one's mind, one's own mind. There can be that separation between performer and audience. And my guess is we're all familiar with that. We perform for ourselves. So that's the first thing. Theater is predicated on separation. And then it seemed to me while I was working on my dissertation that theater spends a lot of energy, most, if not all of its energy, trying to close the gap that was created in that separation. That's what it seemed to me theater then was doing. It was trying to close that gap, to bring theater and life back together, to make theater alive, and to close the distance between actor and audience. So again, just to bring us back to Buddhist teachings, we have a whole that seems to be separate, right? And that probably sounds familiar to us. There's a whole and it seems to be separate. And then we have this other part, and it needs to be rejoined. And the whole, and the whole that seems to be separate, of course, we talk about consciousness, right? The function of consciousness, the fact that there seem to be separate things. When I was working on my dissertation, there was a theater theorist who said that theater itself was consciousness. That was, theater and consciousness go hand in hand. That rejoining of what's separated, I think, is what a lot of people think Buddhism is about. And I would just caution you that it is what a lot of people think Buddhism is about. When you get that think in there, you should at least pay attention because it's not quite what it's about, but it seems to us, we think that it's that way. So getting back then to what I was coming up with in my dissertation, thinking about how theater tries to close this gap, I think people conventionally think of theater as doing this in two ways. I'm only bringing this up so that I can kind of get us to see that this presencing is something a little different than just what I'm going to describe to you. But we might think that one of the ways theater tries to close this gap is through realism, through whatever it is we're seeing on stage really seeming like life. And that's just a convention. Theater hasn't been realistic except for a brief sliver of its existence. But that's the way we think of things. Is it real? Was it realistic? Is that realistic? We talk about motivations of characters, for example. Is that something realistic? Would a character really do that? But I would say that one of the things that's important to realize just in that what it is on stage seem like life, is that it still has that like in it. it's still predicated on being like life because we know it's not life, right? So it's trying to close this gap, but we know that it can't close that gap because it has that like built into it. So that stories, I don't know if you've heard these stories, but stories you may have heard about audience members who see a character on stage and their life is in peril, they jump up on the stage to save the character. From what I've been able to tell, those are apocryphal stories. I think you would have to really misunderstand what's happening in a theater, and so thereby probably be suffering from some kind of illness to think that's what's going on. And I remember telling theater students of mine about that nobody's going to jump up on stage and try to save a character. And I don't think there are any historical incidents of that being true. There are legends, but I think that's all they are. Then my students said, no, wait a minute. Our directing teacher told us a story where a guy blurred the difference between theater and life. And he rushed on stage to save an actor. The character was hanged. And the audience member went, my God, this guy's asphyxiating. And he ran up on stage and he cut the actor loose. And I said, no, that actually proves my point. Because I don't think that guy was rescuing a character. I think he thought the actor was actually asphyxiating and he was concerned and he ran up and he saved the character. The fear was for the actor, not the character. So that realism is just not enough to close that gap, to achieve that presencing we're talking about. Another way we might think of it is through empathy, which is an interesting notion, through empathy. And I would say the characters on stage, but we know that's not how it works. You don't have empathy with all the characters you're seeing on stage, and you might not even have empathy with any of the characters you're seeing on stage. In fact, I think you can have very compelling, alive theater where you don't really feel what the characters are feeling. In fact, a lot of times you're not feeling what the characters are feeling. You're actually having some kind of emotional response or intellectual response to a scene that's occurring. So, for example, a character on stage could be laughing, and that could be breaking your heart to see that character laughing, or vice versa. Somebody could be sobbing on stage, and you could be howling with laughter because of it. So that empathy, again, isn't enough to close that gap. And that's really what I wanted to point out, is those two approaches aren't sufficient to describe the closing of that gap. And in fact, those two things, realism and empathy, are only two techniques, and maybe not even necessarily the best ones, of an array of techniques that theater uses to achieve presencing. And again, presencing then are those moments when it all comes alive. So when it all comes alive together. Actor and audience, theater and life, they don't get obliterated. It's all together, intimately, inseparably together. They're alive. That's it. There's no, it's very intimate. It's very alive. And that's how I started thinking, well, this is how we might be able to think of Zen practice as presencing. Though again, like I said, more nuanced than I'd thought when I was writing my dissertation before I'd encountered the Buddha Dharma. So through mindful awareness, getting back to Zen now, we realize here now reality. In other words, we're right here, right now. Now I want to make sure you heard what I said. We're right here, right now. We're not separate from right here, right now, nor is it separate from us. We're right here, right now. It is us. Right here, right now is us. It's not something separate from us that we experience. It's not I'm experiencing right here, right now. Right here, right now is us. And in that realization is that vitality of life. Katagiri talks about the vigor of a fish leaping out of water. That vitality where life is alive. And sometimes that awareness, that mindful awareness, that realization of here now reality, I sometimes hear it expressed as coming back to the present moment. And if that's the way we hear the teaching, then the word presencing also seems to me like it could be a helpful or useful word. Now, I will say, I would hear people say, come back to the present moment. And there was a period where I actually started to wonder if that's what we were actually doing, coming back to the present moment. And there's a reason for that. And maybe some of you remember me talking about this, but the present is an illusion. The present is an illusion, just like past and future is an illusion. Now, that might already be kind of provocative. I don't think past and present are an illusion, but they're just not here. They're not right here, right now, except as an idea. Past is something that we're going to say just happened. That's the convention. That's how we talk about it. But we can't really pull up the past and show it to you. At best, what we're doing is remembering. And I wrote an entire essay about the project of the beat writer, Jack Kerouac, who engaged in something he called spontaneous prose, which people completely didn't understand what it was he was trying to do. What he was trying to do was listen to what the surrealists called the inexhaustible murmur, what we call chatter, to tune into that. And he would put like an object in his mind. It would be like an event that happened to him. And then he would try to transcribe what his mind was telling him while he was remembering that event. Wow, what a weird, he was trying to write his thought processes. So people would compare what he was doing to what James Joyce was doing. I didn't intend to go on this tangent, by the way, but here I am, stream of consciousness. But that's not what Kerouac was doing. He was actually trying to just write a transcription of what was going through his head as he was thinking about this moment. So that's remembering, though. There's no real past. The act is actually the remembering, and that's what he was trying to capture on the page, was the remembering, the act of remembering. And the present is like the past and like the future, an idea, a notion, a way, a convention that we have. It's fleeting. We go, oh, the present's right here. What do you mean? It's not an illusion. That's the one thing I can tell you, it's right here. But if you've ever tried pinning down the present, you're going to see that it's not here. That's the thing you may have remembered me doing before, because when I was in graduate school and I was starting to think about the present moment, I was thinking about presencing, I was starting to realize that I couldn't actually say when the present was, because whenever I'd say that it was wrong. I'd be like, well, it's right now. But as soon as I said now, I knew that the present moment wasn't there anymore, that this was something else. It was another present moment. And when I tried to say that present moment was gone. And I realized that no matter how fast I cut it, I was never getting the present moment. So, of course, as a brilliant grad student I went, there is no present moment. I determined there was no present, and I don't think I would have been entirely wrong about that. I don't think I was right either, but I wasn't entirely wrong because of what I just said. Where is the present moment? What is this really that seems to be the present moment? When you let go of the notion or the conception of the present moment, and you're just here now. Again, here now is us, here now is you. When that is what's showing up, then you see that present moment doesn't really capture it. But it certainly appears to be one. It seems like there's a present moment. Again, we just can't, the problem with all appearances is you just can't pin them down. So you could say, it seems like present moment right now. It seems like there's this thing that's going on. But if you actually tried to define what that is, to put a box around it, you can't do it. And that's where you see, okay, so present moment isn't quite what it is that's taking place. So we can say then that coming back to present moment, if that's the teaching, we come back to present moment with right view, we can see that present moment is just how here now reality is showing up. So coming back to present moment is really just realizing here now reality, which is showing up right now as what we call present moment. But it's still here, it's just here now. We don't have to give it that, even saying here now, we start getting ideas about what we mean by now. Now is present moment. It's right now. No, it's now. No, it's not. Right here. Well, that one's a little harder for us. But the thing about here is no matter where you are, here you are. That's the nature of here. So again, when we get ideas about here, we start maybe thinking, well, okay, Dharma Field sitting on a chair, facing the front of the room. But how about when you're driving in your car? I'm guessing then you're saying that's here. When you're at home eating a piece of toast, that's here, right? So here never really is a place we can locate either. So here now reality also has potential sticking points if we get some ideas about it. But present moment then, coming back to present moment is really just realizing here now reality, which is us. Now, I don't know why I started thinking about presencing again. I had gone to see a theater production recently that I did not feel presencing was occurring in. So maybe that was it. It was one of those things where I was sitting there and I think everybody around me was having a great time. So there's another element to this that I'm just not going to go into. It's the thing called an audience, which I remember as a performer creating a piece for the Walker Art Center. I went, the audience is just this thing that comes together for this particular show. Beginnings of thinking about what an audience is, and the audience is not a thing either. It's an activity, right? So that part of is sort of missing. So, but all around me, the audience was engaged and I was kind of removed. So maybe that's what it was. But I can also say there was a talk recently that Steve Hagen gave where he said, we don't really talk about presence in Buddhism because it's all presence. And when he said that, I was like, that's absolutely right. That to me helps clarify what presencing is, I think, in theater and in life. So it's not what I offered in my former definition of it, which was the evoking of presence. I don't think it's that, because presence, it's all presence. Presence is already here. No evoking necessary. No evoking necessary. That's just the realization that it is, even when it doesn't seem to be, right? It's the recognition of that, the realization of that. And as Steve said, it's all presence. That the realization is that the presence is it all. Or to quote Samuel Beckett, who was very precise in the way he used words, another theater practitioner. He said it this way. I don't remember what piece it was in. He said, it all, it all. I mean, you get the urge there? You can't say it all with it all. So you might as well say it again, right? It all, it all. You could probably keep saying it all, it all, it all. And I love that phrase, it all, so much as a way to really try to point to genuinely, it's all presence, right? The presence is it all, it all. When I would put this in articles I would write for the book review that I wrote my Kerouac essay about, the editor always crosses that second it all out. And I'm just like, I'm not going to go down that. It's a Samuel Beckett illusion. You don't go there. But I like that. I like that it all, it all. So even when it doesn't seem to be it all, it's all presence, actor, audience, theater, or life. It's all here. It's all now. All here, all now, mutually supporting one another and unobstructed by one another. All together, but still clearly separate. Things that are together, but all together. Presencing. Presencing. It's all here. It's all now. And that word it is interesting. Wayne Lewis, I don't know if he's here with us this morning, but he tends to join us on Zoom, lives in Ely. And we had the fortune of expressing gratitude. Wayne was able to come down to the Twin Cities last weekend and join us. And he and I were talking, and he said, "Yeah, I don't like that word, it." You know, so we have a book in the library. It's titled "Just This Is It," and Bo had just given a class on that book, and he goes, because I said, "Well, I think it's an interesting word." You know, what Wayne didn't like about it is the thingness of it. You know, it. He goes, "What's it referring to?" And I said, "That's kind of what I like about it." You know, what is it referring to? And I think about that sentence we might use, "It is raining." Now, what are we talking about? What's the it we're talking about, right? So there's something about that word that I kind of like. And yet I get Wayne's point, right? Because you still, once you use that word it, now you're trying to figure out, well, what is it? And I would say if you just can keep it at that, then it's a great word. Just what is it? That's exactly right. But whatever it is, it's all here. It's all now, presencing. And in our practice, to engage in presencing is to be aware of that. And how are we aware of that? You just come back to, we'll say, present moment. And present moment is what? The way here now reality is showing up. And we can settle into present moment, we can actually see here now reality. So that's my talk. Now, I know there was a lot about the theater in there, forgive me. But if you have any questions or comments, I welcome them at this time. David.
It is on first.
It is on first. Yes.
Steve, continuing with that analogy of theater, I've heard of the theater of the absurd,
Yeah.
that UNESCO and those. Is there a analogy there too with interrupting when the audience gets sucked in and trying to keep them distinct from the message of the work?
Yeah. Well, now that's interesting because that's one of the things I was writing about. So if you don't mind us talking about theater for a second, I do love theater. I mean, I wrote hundreds of pages about it on a dissertation that was unreadable. As my dissertation chair wrote after I turned in a 60 pages, it was a chapter. She wrote, in essence, this is bullshit. You have to rewrite all of this, you know. But that moment, so one of my favorite playwrights is Bertolt Brecht. And Bertolt Brecht, that was his thing, is he wanted the audience, he actually wanted us to realize that we don't have empathy with those characters on stage. That what it is that's on stage is actually a cultural construction. And he wanted us to be able to have a distance from that construction so we could engage in critical thought with it. So we could really think, what is it trying to point out? Why is it trying to point out this to me? So we'd have critical distance from what was on stage. Now, I thought he did that so that we could break down the barrier between the construct of the theater and life. So I actually thought that in that distancing, there's an attempt to close the gap, just in a different way. And in fact, the German theorist Walter Benjamin, I told you, get into the weeds here, but this guy was a great thinker, truly a great thinker, Jewish writer, critic in Germany in the 1920s through the end of his life when he got caught by the Nazis. Anyhow, he called that, I don't know, the dais, trying to close the gap with the dais, you know. So anyhow, I appreciate your saying that, but I really do think that what those artists were trying to do is to make us aware of the artificiality of theater, because that's what really was happening. So thereby closing the gap between the artificiality and what was really taking place. Does that make sense? Yeah, yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. And that's, by the way, if I can bring this back to Zen practice then, what we are doing when we're aware is what we do in life is we do the theatricalization of life. So life is as it is. Theater is as if it were. That's how theater works. It's in a subjunctive mood, as if it were like this, okay? We go through life and we impose narratives and explanations on life, and then live out our life as if it were the way that we've imagined it to be. So there's a theatricalization, you could say, of life, that life is as if it were this way. In our awareness and bringing our attention back to what's taking place is that murmur I was talking about, that inexhaustible murmur that the surrealists were trying to tap into, that Jack Kerouac was trying to listen to. You know, that is just the voice, the narration that we're laying over the top of everything. It's always there. And so our awareness is just to notice when we're doing that. It's to see that and to see that what we're often responding to in life isn't what's really taking place. It's our notions of what's taking place, our evaluation of our notions of what's taking place. So we say, this is what's taking place, and that is good or bad or neutral, and then we respond accordingly. And all this is mental construction and not exactly what's taking place until we realize that's what's taking place. We're creating a mental construction. We're getting caught up in our ideas about it, and we're acting out of that. That's what we wake up to. We see that's what we're doing. So that's what I think those theater artists are doing, the same thing. They're going, this is a construction, you know, and it has values. It has things it's trying to instill in you, even if not consciously, even if just by reiterating the, you know, thoughts of the day, the way that we think about things, just in doing that. But it's a construction. So we need to see that's what's going on to see clearly what's taking place. And that's what we're doing in this practice too, is to see clearly what's really taking place, not what we think is taking place or what we believe is taking place. Yeah, Kelly. From Ken?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm just wondering, Steve, you've probably heard of mirror neurons, right? Mirror neurons?
I'm sorry,
Mirror
mirror neurons? No, I don't
neuron.
know.
Oh, um, they've only been identified in the last decade or so, I think, but we have a special set of neurons in our muscular system that when we see something, or even when we hear something, but when we see, especially another person, these neurons create the sensation in our own muscles, which mirror the activities we see in another person, especially the face. So this is interesting to me because you can actually feel it after just with mindfulness. When you're watching somebody, you can feel this. Well, especially sometimes you can feel your mouth. Actually, somebody who's doesn't speak English very well, you often see them mouthing other people's words. And this allows you to understand what you're seeing. So this is also happening during theater, I think. You haven't heard anything about that?
I have to admit, my hearing is pretty bad right now. I'm sorry to say. I heard a lot of what you said, but not all of it. So, Mary?
Sorry to be obstreperous, but I don't know how you could ever experience. I mean, mirror neurons are posited.
Oh,
as
so you're
underlying-
taking it, Ken, now? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're posited as underlying the empathic experience. And I don't know, that can never be experienced directly. You cannot experience mirror neurons. You can certainly posit them, and you can design experiments that make you believe that in fact they exist. But it's a matter of belief. Ultimately, it comes down to a matter of belief. about what mirror neurons can and cannot do with respect to empathy in the course of human interaction. But then having studied Buddhism and worked with Steve Hagen for so long, I'm very skeptical about positing any kind of neurological basis for this sort of thing.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, so, yeah, sorry, Ken, I can't respond just because I didn't quite hear what you said. So, and I've been having I don't know, a decrease in hearing or an increase in hearing loss, however you want to put it, over the last 6 months. And so I did hear some of what you said, but not enough to be able to respond. So, but thanks for sharing, and thank you, Mary, for responding. Yeah, Ron.
Something in the earlier conversation made me think about something I vaguely remember, but you probably know well, is the Shakespeare scene in Midsummer Night's Dream where there's the play within the play.
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how that relates to the conversation. That idea.
You see that in theater all the time, right? That's a very common trope, because theater is about that playfulness, that is, as it wereness. It's about taking on roles and putting off roles. So it often dramatizes that. You know, it's just sort of, it's very working. So yeah, I love watching that. A lot of theater, even if they don't have a scene where there's a play within a play, you'll see scenes where people are acting. Like, hey, when you go talk to him, say it like this, to tell him, hey, could I have, there'll be little scenes like that where they're like trying things out or trying on roles, or that's a trope of theater, because that's what theater's about, is putting on those roles, that as ifness. I'm not really the person you think I am. I'm somebody else. And there's a pleasure in that. And that's the pleasure I think that theater has, is in knowing the separation that's there and watching when I was in graduate school, trying to figure out that, watching the theater try to bring that back together again. So I can come up with pretty extreme examples of that. I don't have a piece of chalk. I used to do this with a piece of chalk, but it started out, I remember that when this notion first came to me is when I was in a graduate school seminar, and the professor leading the seminar was a theater director, and he was sitting in his chair, and he got up and he asked us, he goes, "What's this?" And a bunch of people looking at a guy pointing at a chair going, "What's this?" And we just we thought something was up, but what are you going to say? You go, "What's a chair?" He goes, "Now put it on the stage, and what is it?" And then I remember, for me, I just went, huh, it's whatever you say it is, right? And so then you say that it's that, and then the whole audience goes, okay, so now that's and you can think of puppets doing that. I could, like, what I do then is I pick up a piece of chalk, white piece of chalk, you go, "That's Moby Dick." You know what I mean? And then we just go, okay, that's the rule now, that's Moby Dick. And there's something fun in trying to imagine a piece of chalk as Moby Dick, right? There's something really fun in that. And theater knows that there's something really joyful in that, closing the gap between, the distance between what reality and the pretendness of it, right? There's something joyful in that. So you'll see, yeah, that's a common thing in theater, is to stage shows or to do acting or to put on roles or whatever. Yeah. And it is in life too, right? So it's something else we have to watch. It's fun to put on roles, Yeah, I'm reading a book right now called Doppelganger by Naomi Klein. And it's about, she was writing about the fact that people mistake her for Naomi Wolf. Now, I don't really know either of those people, but I heard this was an interesting book, and I'm reading it. It's kind of interesting. And so Naomi Klein spends a lot of time telling people, I'm not Naomi Wolf. But one of the things that Naomi Klein was known for, she wrote a book called No Logo. No Logo was Logo, yeah. No Logo, which was about branding. And she realized that she was becoming branded herself as the non-branding person that that was kind of the brand that she was getting. And so then she became very resistant to it, but she also saw the draw to being the non-branding person, to brand herself as the non-branding. And she also saw the dangers of it, the risks that that could entail. So I think about somebody who I really admired as a young man, and I still think when you get right down to this guy's prose, the best of it, some of the best writing, I think, in journalism in the 20th century, and that was Hunter Thompson. And he had this persona, this kind of larger than life persona, and you could say it killed him. Because he had a brand, it was Hunter Thompson. Well, what did Hunter Thompson do? There was a lot of, alcohol and drugs that were part of that. And it got to the point where he was so dependent upon alcohol that when he had surgery as an older man, they actually had to pump alcohol into his body during the surgery because his body's response to not having alcohol would have been so strong. So playing those roles can be fun. People know, oh, this guy, he's this guy. And I think we do that. I'm like this. I'm the guy who does this thing, whatever it is. And there's some joy in that. And then people go, oh, and there's Steve, and he's the guy who does that. And they're always doing it, I don't know. We may not even do it that consciously, but it's that, again, we know how people perceive us. Getting back to theatricalization of life, we performer audience, how people perceive us, and we give them the thing that we think that they want. And so that role playing that we see in the theater is so fun to watch. Partly, I think it's fun to watch because it's recognizable impulse in ourselves to do that, to take on those roles. Right. And again, if you watch the theater, you can see how sometimes that role playing can create all kinds of confusion. Right. So a genre of theater that I like when it's good is the farce, because farces are predicated on people telling lies and making up stories about themselves. So you watch something like an Oscar Wilde farce. Importance of Being Earnest is probably one of the greatest farces ever written. And they're getting all those identities going up in the air. They can't even quite keep track of them, which is quite amusing. What always happens, or if you watch Fawlty Towers, the John Cleese show, that was a farcical structure to each program. The thing just goes out of control. It's like you got a train going, it's going down this train track, and then it's going down a hill and it's going too fast, and it goes off the rails, and then it all comes out, what's really taking place. Usually that's what happens. And then happy ending. And then play ends in a happy end. But when all those roles, so one of the things theater can help us to see that we can see in our own life is that as pleasurable as that is, it can create a lot of confusion, a lot of pain for us until it all comes clean. And then we start all over again. Anything else? Great, thanks.